back on air.
Hello and welcome to another instalment of Once Upon a Time in the Ashes. The race through the decades continues as we tell the stories of those English and Australian cricketers who played in only one Ashes test. We've breezed through the 1993 series, Steve Watkin, our guide, as a one-sided series culminated in that rare thing during the 90s, an England win. And in no small part thanks to a Welshman ripping through the Aussie top three in the second innings. That episode with Glamorgan's finest is available wherever you get your podcasts. But England couldn't carry the momentum into the next series in Australia in 1994-95. Australia won the first two tests convincingly, and after a drawn game in Sydney, they were 2 up with 2 to play. Ashes retained, but series still in the balance. Following on from that ball against Mike Gatting at Old Trafford, Shane Warne was once again to the fore in those first two tests. 11 wickets at the Gabba, another 9 at the MCG, including his one and only test hat-trick. And if things weren't bad enough for England, Australia were about to call up another leg spinner for the fourth test at the Adelaide Oval. That man was Peter McIntyre, and his time in the Ashes spotlight is now. Peter McIntyre was a leg spin bowler for Victoria, South Australia and Australia. He took 322 first-class wickets, taking 5 wickets in an innings on 12 occasions, and he played 2 tests for Australia, including his one and only Ashes test in the 4th game of the 1994-95 series at the Adelaide Oval. Peter, welcome to Once Upon a Time in the Ashes.
Thanks for having me, Graham.
Yeah, it's really good to speak to you. And look, I'm sure his name will pop up throughout our conversation, but I just wonder if we could start with Shane Warne. You know, you were both leg spinners, rivals of Victoria, teammates for Australia in your one and only Ashes test. How shocked were you to hear of his death?
Oh, look, I think it certainly shocked many people, and it did shock me. I remember heading to the Cricket Academy in Adelaide with him at the same time, and I actually went and lived with Terry Jenner during that time in a 3-month stint, and Warnie was living in a hotel in Glenelg, I think, and Rod Marsh was our head coach. You sort of start thinking about your mortality when you're the only survivor out of those 4. They're all gone. They're all gone with heart attacks. So they're important to get checked up and make sure you're in good health. So, but I had a long association with Warnie, and I guess when I look at it, it's 13 years of competing with him, and he was my blonde problem, as I tell people. He was just I think he was a freak of nature, really. He not only had a great technique of leg spin bowling, but his strategic cricket brain was one of the best ever seen, I think, as well.
Definitely, yeah. It's always more shocking when you think that person's in good health.
He did say that, like, for 30 years, he hadn't stayed in the same city for more than 2 weeks for 30 years. Imagine the stress on the body of that. Put that with diet, put that with drinking vodka Red Bulls, smoking. All of that, it's a combination for unhealthiness, isn't it? And when the lockdowns came during COVID, it was probably a blessing for him because he spent some time with his 3 kids and friends.
All right. Well, yeah, thanks for your memories there. Let's bring the focus back to you. So obviously, Warnie was a giant of Ashes cricket. What are your first memories of Ashes cricket when you were growing up?
Oh, it was always the Lily Thompsons, I think. Tony Gregg, that sort of era. I was born in 66. World Series came along in 77, wasn't it, I think? And then sort of we went through that era. I still remember Derek Underwood ploughing away with his left armers. Didn't know whether he was a spinner or a medium pacer. John Lever.
Well, tell us where you grew up. You grew up in Victoria, but whereabouts in Victoria, and how did you get into your cricket?
Yeah, look, I was brought up on a large farm only an hour out of Melbourne, and I had 2 brothers and a sister, and a father as a farmer. He was a farmer out towards Romsey, where Dean Jones later moved to. Another one we've lost, actually. And yeah, he moved out there, and we had a long friendship with Dino. And I was lucky enough to play with my 2 brothers and father in the one team for Romsey. And at the age of 16, after playing in some, I think, country cups, they called it back there, International Harvester Cups, got invited down to the Essendon Cricket Club at 16 years of age. And I think I started in the 4th there. There were 13 spinners and I was the 13th, I think. So it was work your way through.
Yeah, but you soon worked your way up that pecking order, no doubt. Yeah, and so I guess most people associate you with South Australia, don't they? Because you played most of your cricket for them, but your first-class debut obviously came for Victoria. So how did you progress from Essendon to Victoria? How did that kind of work out?
Yeah, look, as I said, got to Essendon at 16, stayed there till I was 26 before moving to Adelaide. So I had a 10-year career at Essendon.
Yeah.
I basically got to the seconds, I think, of I might have been 19 years of age. The leg spinner in the first was dating the chairman of selector's daughter. So I knew I was up against it. So after doing pretty well in the twos, I had a call from Collingwood, actually, that wanted me to move across to Collingwood. And I decided that I wanted to take the route of actually making the effort to earn my position in the first. And I got to do that. And my first wicket for Essendon was Julian Weiner with a wrong-un. I remember that clearly, ex-Australian player. I very quickly moved into the Victorian team after that. It was, I guess, was an era where leg spinners weren't in vogue. It had disappeared again. And I think it's about to happen again. It's in the T20 arena at the moment. But when you look through the teams and their test sides and that, you're not seeing a lot of leg spin. And we seem to have these eras of Abdul Qadir, for example, cuts a swathe through international cricket and then it disappears for a number of years. And I remember having sessions with Richie Beno and Jim Higgs, and they're just so keen to get leg spin back in vogue. And it was a time where I suppose I'd sort of come in the scene in Victoria. There wasn't many around. Then Warne came a sort of 2 years after me. It sort of started building again, and we started replacing each other. I suppose I ended up playing 27 games for Victoria. We also had another guy called Paul Jackson, who was a left arm orthodox. Yeah, and then basically once I got to Adelaide and lived with Terry Jenner, he became coach of T3 Gully. He said, "Right, you're coming over here. You're playing for me. We'll get you playing for South Australia, and I'll get you a baggy green," he reckoned. So I thought that was pretty appealing, and so I moved over and I had a 10-year stint with T3 Gully.
Yeah, awesome. All right, just pick up on a couple of points you made there. Do you remember your first class debut? I believe that was against WA. Is that right, in 89?
It was. Yeah, that tough one. I think there was Mike Valletta and Tom Moody. Pretty strong team. Jeff Marsh. You probably know more of my stats in that game, but I think I picked up a couple of wickets. Probably went for plenty of runs. So,
well, it was a brutal first-class debut. Obviously, a good batting track, and they scored a lot of runs, and so did you guys. So that must be incredible. Like, not used to playing 4 days, and then suddenly you bowled 40 overs in that match. You took 2 for 109. I don't know if you remember your first wicket. Jeff Marsh, I think, was your first wicket. What was that like, just bowling all those overs though for one?
Oh, look, I guess I was also in an AFL development squad. Right. As well for football, and get myself pretty fit, and I enjoyed the fitness side of things. So, I mean, just strolling in and bowling some leggies, it's usually not your fitness, it's your shoulder and fingers that suffer. But yeah, of course it was tough. It was not having played much 4-day cricket, because you didn't play much second 11 cricket back then like they do now. You'd sort of gone from club cricket, you'd play sort of second 11 state cricket, which was only a couple of days, and all of a sudden you're thrust into the 4-day arena with all these test players, Australian players that often played Shield cricket back then. So,
and you mentioned Terry Jenner, so we'll come back to him in a minute, because I'm sure he taught you a lot when you were living with him. What about yourself and Shane Warne? Just wondering about in the nets and things like that. Were you both kind of trying out different deliveries against each other and all the rest of it?
Oh yeah, I think I wrote a piece on Twitter about how it's amazing when you compete with a guy for 13 years, but it's healthy competition. We made each other better in those early days. We went off and toured into Zimbabwe. We discovered the flipper. The flipper wasn't talked about at all.
So how does that come back? What do you mean you discovered the flipper? How does that work?
Oh, I think I can't exactly remember the time, but we're in the Victorian nets, and I think we'd had someone come there. Might have been George Tribe or something. He talked about the flipper. I think George Tribe played a lot of county cricket and took a hell of a lot of wickets. And he talked about the flipper, which was discovered by Clary Grimmett, which is basically flicking it out the front of the fingers. And Clary used to be called the Fox, of course, because he had a distinct flick of the fingers when he bowled it, and they got onto it. So what he'd do is, when he'd bowl a leg spinner, he'd click his left hand as he's coming through, and they'd think it was a flipper. So he's deceiving in another way. But we sort of got onto this flipper and started mucking around with it, and batsmen just had no idea what it was. Like,
Yeah.
they didn't understand what we were trying to do, and then that got into the Zutter where we turned the wrist sort of all the way around to throw it out the front of the hand, which is the same, spin it backwards.
Yeah.
And then we went to Zimbabwe, and I still remember this guy, Ian Butchart. We took it turns on getting him out with a flipper, and we ended up renaming it the Butchie ball. So Warney had a distinctive grip where normally your fingers have got a spread between your index and second finger. Warney's fingers were almost together, which was unbelievable, really, to be able to spin a ball like that with a grip like that. But that's why his wrong one was pretty poor. But his flipper was so strong because you had to actually bring those fingers together. So his were always together. So
Yeah. So your kind of chief weapon, other than the leg spinner, was the wrong one, was it? Whereas his became the flipper, didn't it?
Yeah. I had a decent wrong one, but it was certainly pickable. I did bowl it a lot, but Warney didn't bowl his wrong one very much at all. It wasn't much of a wrong one. It was more of a top spinner, but his flipper was amazing. But the revs on the leg spinner, I remember at the academy standing with Terry Jenner, and we're just spinning at the ball to ourselves, and TJ gives me a nudge and says, "Have a look at that." And it's like his revs are going twice as fast as ours, So
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is it really noticeable at that time that he's more accomplished at the leg spin than the other guys around him?
yeah, I think when you looked at his wrist and his forearm, I often, when I'm coaching, I'd say, bring up a video of Shane Warne. He's just got the perfect technique to model yourself on, because it's just got that perfect, I suppose, the biomechanics of bowling leg spin, and where his release was with the arm and the wrist, it all came together, and sort of coming over with your right hip as well.
Yeah.
He just put all the sort of body forces in behind, just not the wrist, and that's what gave him so much velocity on the ball when he bowled. Yeah.
Okay, so you learned a lot from each other, and then you've already mentioned Terry Jenner. Did he kind of turn you into, if there's such a thing, the complete leg spinner?
Yeah, I'll tell you what TJ was good at. He was good at very quickly identifying the flaws you had, and Warney had them too. One we had was, our front foot often went across our body, pointing to a fine leg, and then coming back to your batsman, which is a target. And I fought that most of my career. That's why I say Warney's technique was almost perfect. But he slipped into that as well. What TJ was good was being really, really honest with you. If he thought you weren't bowling to your best abilities, he let you know. And he very quickly let you know. And he very supportive, but he'd be straight on and just say, no, that's crap. You slipped into this again. I've told you about this. And they're very much about thinking a batsman out as well. If you bowl a bad short ball, set it up, basically, bowl another one, and they get them on the cut shot, and then you slip a flipper in, say, and they go back on the back foot, and bang, it's all over, sort of thing. You're very much thinking about setting up batsmen to get them out. That's like 2 or 3 overs out. And that's where I say, look, I think I was better at that in my later years, especially when being captain by Darren Lehman. Yeah, I relied on a captain, whereas Warney was probably a captain in himself. He knew exactly what he was doing. The captain sort of let him go. So
yeah, and you said you lived with Terry Jenner as well, and he was very honest with you. What was it like? You come down for breakfast, and he's already telling you about all the wrong balls you bowled the previous day.
Well, when I got there, Terry had just come out of spending some time in prison, actually. So
really,
yeah, there was an embezzlement case, and got himself into a bit of trouble gambling, and was working for a car yard, so he was slipping some deposits in the pocket, and unfortunately, and I think he spent 14 months and came out. So it was a tough period for him, just sort of coming out. But I think it was really Rod Marsh that was trying to get him back into society and get him going again. And I think having Warney and myself in Adelaide, and myself living with TJ as well, it took his mind off things, I think. And he basically was a coach at the academy, and I was probably training most of the time, living in this small unit with TJ. Look, it was a good relationship. We talked cricket. We just constantly talked cricket, and it was his love, and his love was leg spin, and he was a fantastic coach.
Let's come on to this Ashes summer then. So 94, 95. Before you play your first game for South Australia that season, are you thinking, England are in town, if I play well, I've got a chance to get in this test side?
Look, I know I'd come off a pretty good season beforehand, and I'd been gaining momentum for South Australia, and the odd article was coming up that, England are coming, we're going to need leg spinners against England. And I was aware of them, and name was probably being thrown around. And I was becoming more comfortable in the first class space. I always had a good record against touring teams as well. Whether it was Sri Lanka that came out or England A, Pakistan. Yeah, I've seemed to have been able to take a bag against touring teams, and that's probably goes back to that whole not seeing a lot of leg spin in the international arena, right? Whereas there was a fair bit of it in the domestic scene. So, and the Shield pitches were very difficult to bowl on. Adelaide Oval was great for spin. Sydney Cricket Ground even better. But once you got to the Perth, the Gabbers, even Melbourne with the drop-in pitches that came in, it was a difficult thing in domestic cricket. And I think I probably had a better record in domestic cricket than Warne did. He probably didn't play a lot of it. I think that was the factor. But then a touring team had come, and I seemed to be able to do really well against them. And I think that's probably got the selectors' interest going when every time that played against a touring team, whether it was here or in the UK against second 11 team there, I remember taking a 5 for Edgbaston, and would have loved to play county cricket. I'll tell you, could have gone well there.
Yeah. So when did you play in England? What year was that, and who was that for?
Yeah, I went on a Young Australia tour. Was it the TCCB back then?
Yeah,
it was basically a second 11 English side. The Young Australia tour was 94, 90 potentially. Yep, but did well in that as well. So finished with I think 20 odd wickets there.
Nice. In terms of just looking at the stats, it looks like the two games that got you Test selection were one against the touring side, against England that season, when he took 6 wickets. And then the last Shield game before the Test match in which you were selected against Victoria, where you took 9 wickets. So do you think those were the two games that really propelled you into that team?
Oh, I think they were looking for some consistency from me. As I said, I was because we moved around grounds. I'd take a fifer and then I'd be not playing the next game. I'd be 12th man. Go to Hobart, where it's just a cemetery for spinners down in Hobart, and and then all of a sudden you're sitting on your ass again, you're 12th man, and then come back to Adelaide and you take some wickets and you're off to Melbourne, and oh no, we're going to go with a quick in Melbourne. So it was difficult to get consistency in it. Having 2 or 3 games together like that, I think certainly helped me with the selection with my great mate Greg Blewett. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So how did you find out you'd been selected? Do you remember if there was a phone call or you found out on the radio?
Definitely a phone call. I think it was it might have been Trevor Hones that called me. We'd also had a dinner, I think, after that win in that Shield game, because the Test match wasn't long afterwards, I don't think, after that Shield game. And I think Jeff Hammond might have given us both a word that we were pretty close as well, and then got the phone call, I think, and then it was sort of, remember, I bloody had a car accident.
No way.
The day before, rushing around trying to get everything finalised. So I ran into the back of somebody, and not a bad one, but just all the stresses of getting ready for it, and had a bloody car accident.
Yeah, God, nightmare.
Yeah.
So how do you feel? And I guess what have you got to do then in terms of all those preparations? What are you running around trying to do? You're trying to get tickets for your friends and family and things like that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean that's part of it, but your mind's sort of racing because you're about to pay. It's everything you've played cricket for, right? So what I'm really rapt about is that I didn't replace Warne. I played with him because we'd been competing for the same spot for so many years, and the theory was that if we played 2 leg spinners, that we're a chance to beat England, and of course it backfired, didn't it? Because they beat us. So, but that was just great. There was a lot of press around that Australia was going with 2 leg spinners, which was very unusual. Hadn't happened for a very long time.
No, that's what I found fascinating. And did you ever play in the same Victoria side with Warne?
You know what? I don't think I did. We replaced each other for a little while, not for long. And I think once I took off to South Australia, there was talk that Warne may go to Sydney, and I think Alan Border very quickly got him into the Australian team. Took him to Sri Lanka, I think it was, or it started in Sydney and then took him to Sri Lanka. And I don't think he played a lot of early games with Victoria before he played for Australia. So, yeah, that's probably the first time we played together.
That is so crazy. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, it is.
And what does he say when you walk into the dressing room? Like, oh, what the F are you doing here?
Oh, no. I mean, we'd had a long association. We'd been on tours together, as I said.
Yeah, you must have been thrilled to see you.
Yeah. So it was, he probably thought, what do we need another leg spinner for? I'm the greatest. What do we need another one for? But yeah, it turned out to be a tough match for both of us, I suppose. Although I think I took same amount of wickets as him.
Yeah, both got a couple.
Yeah. I remember Mike Gadding and Mike Atherton were ones that held us up. So, but Mike Gadding was my first wicket. So,
yeah. Well, I think back to the ball of the century. He doesn't like leg spinners, does he? Didn't like Warne, didn't like you.
yeah, but so it peeled off 117 before I got him. So, yeah.
But what was that like? Take your first Test wicket. I mean, is it a really special moment?
Oh, just absolutely. I mean, many get into a Test team and don't take a wicket, right? So it's just that whole. You're 8 years old and you pick up a cricket ball and playing in the backyard with your brothers, and you go through the different teams and you move states and the sacrifices you make, the amount of training you put in, and you get to travel the world with it. But it's just a culmination of everything that you're trying to do to wear that baggy green. That baggy green means a lot to people, and so it should. There's only 450 has the baggy green over 130 years or something. So puts it into perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, massively. Yeah. How did you feel like, I mean, aside from, taking some decent wickets and some good players like Gatting, how did you feel you bowled? Did you perform as you wanted to?
Yeah, look, you can always do better. England batted first, so always tough to bowl spin on a first day Adelaide Oval wicket. Normally Adelaide Oval, they used to call me fourth day Mac. You wait till the fourth day when everything's worn out and away you go to work. So
you've got to be careful that you only get paid quarter of your wages if you start talking like that.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, it was a pretty full-on experience, especially having to bat with Bluey to get his first Test 100.
Yeah, how was that? I saw that.
Yeah, well, it was a bit stressful, and I had a bit of trouble with Devi Malcolm, right? He sorted me out pretty quickly. And I knew, because I was batting 11 and Craig McDermott was 10, and he'd taken off to hospital actually with some bowel problems. And I sort of come out, I think Bluey was 92. He realised too, and he'd started to get on with it. And I just said to him, mate, I've faced a couple here. You need to get on with it because I'm not around here for very long. And he did, and it ended up Billy came back from the hospital and batted anyway, but he got his 100, and it was pretty touch and go for a while there. So
yeah. Well, that's awesome that you were there and you just about helped him over the line. Yeah. What was Devon Malcolm like to face? I've seen the wicket on YouTube. He looked pretty rapid.
Oh, I just had trouble. And on number 11 bat, right? I can hang around, but I've got nothing else than that, and I just had trouble picking it up out of the hand. It was, and he comes from so wide of the crease as well, and he had some serious pace, right? But Bluey didn't seem to have any problem. He just on the back foot and pull shots as usual. So yeah, but I was in all sorts. So yeah, I think I only lasted about 6 balls or so.
What about the dressing room? We talked about Warne. What about the other players? Obviously, you knew Greg really well. Was it a welcoming atmosphere?
Oh yeah. You play with a lot of the guys and against the guys in those days. So yeah, most of the New South Wales guys, Slats and Tubby, the War brothers, I knew them all pretty well.
Yeah. There's no pranks played on the new boy, anything like that?
No, I remember I roomed with Booney, even though I was a local. Yeah, he enjoyed a glass of red and sort of in the middle of the night, he didn't sleep a lot. So yeah you always have sit up and have a chat. In those days, you could sit around and have a drink and
bit of late night cricket chat. Yeah.
Yeah, but then that was sort of that one test and had to wait until my next one.
Yeah, it was a bit of a wait. Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you. Obviously, the next test was at Perth. Joe Angel, actually, who's also part of the series, he actually replaced you in that game.
Yeah.
Did you always think, look, there's no chance in Perth just because of the makeup of the side?
Pretty much, yeah. We all know what the Perth wicket played like in those days. And if you weren't going in with 3 or 4 quicks in Perth, you're mad. It was a distinct advantage for Australia to have that bounce, and pace bowlers always did well there. Although Warne had a pretty good record at Perth. And this is where it's interesting with him. You look at his record in Perth and Brisbane, and then you look at Sydney, Adelaide even, where spinners have always done well. The records are not great. It's not great. So, and it just shows how different he was as an attacking leg spinner, I guess. So,
was it the extra bounce? Was that what kind of helped him?
It was the extra everything. It was the drift, because of the amount of revs on the ball. The drift was his major weapon. Well, you saw that in the ball of the century, right? He's thrown it down and sort of middle and off, and it's pitched outside leg, and and you could see the drift in the ball. So you need to have a look at the other ball of this century when McIntyre got S. Tendulkar out in New Delhi, right?
Listen, I've watched it. I've watched it, and we'll come to that. It might even be better. Absolutely. Just quickly before we get to that, because I'd love to get your thoughts on that game in India. So we talked about Perth being the next Test match. The next tour was to the West Indies.
Yeah.
Were you a bit disappointed not to be on that one?
Yeah, I was actually. I was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, would have loved to have been on that one.
Well, yeah. And instead of doing that, you actually managed to win the Sheffield Shield, didn't you? And funny enough, because we were just talking about your batting, you were saying, well, I couldn't do much against Devon Malcolm. It was your batting that won the day in that Shield, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, I set it up on the first couple of days with none for 160 or something. So I made sure it went for 5 days. And Maisie wasn't much better. And we ran into a guy called Adam Gilchrist who had arrived. He was putting us both into the stand. Yeah, amazing match. The makeup of the two sides, for starters, they had a serious amount of a similar number of people that had played Test match and international cricket on both sides, batters and bowlers. We had to basically bat out to save the game because we weren't going to make the runs. I'm pretty sure we needed 300 odd in the second innings or high 200s. And we sort of lost wickets slowly through the day. The tension had built and we got to tea time. A big crowd came down. So that made it even more stressful. I remember Buffer wrapping himself up in bandages like a mummy to try and take some tension out of the room. Guys were taking off to look at Blue was building his house. Guys were going for a walk. We got down to the last hour, basically. Shane, George and I had to bat out to draw it, and we did it.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, it was 40 minutes, I think. You faced 45 balls. He faced 30. So that's a serious amount of time, isn't it?
Yeah, and, Brad Hogg, Brendan Julian, Joe Angel, they had a bloody good bowling attack as well. So, and, we'd been building for a few years. We'd lost the Shield final the year before. We had to get this one. We had to get that one. And it's probably, I'm more remembered for that around this town than I am for playing Test cricket, I think. Yeah. I run into so many people, when I think about it, it's 26 years ago, right? So,
yeah.
I was there when you were batting at the end of that Shield match, and you're another one. You must have been one of those 15,000 that came down from the city.
Brilliant. So big celebrations after that one?
Oh, yeah. It went on. We finished on the Wednesday night. I don't think I got much sleep for the next 2 nights. And I had to front up for Tea Tree Gully in the A-grade final because they were a reasonably new club and they'd never won one. So I remember the Friday took off to a place called Magic Mountain. It's like a water slide on my own, trying to sober up and just gather my thoughts. And I think Tim May had the Planet, the nightclub, the Planet at the time, and ended up back there on the Friday night with some of the lads. And anyway, we got into the game and we're playing Adelaide, and Jason Gillespie and Ben Johnson and Paul Noves had played in the Shield final. Anyway, we ended up making, I think, 175. And anyway, off I go. I'm back at the Planet on the Saturday night. I still remember, I reckon it was 6 a.m. and we're walking out of the plane at 6 a.m. And Maisie turns to me and says, "Look at this rain. You're not playing today. Let's open up the bar again." So we went back in and we got to about 8:30, I think it was. And then I said to him, Maisie, you know what Adelaide Oval's like? They got all the covers there. Normally they can get it ground up pretty quickly. If this rain stops, which it has at 8:30, I reckon I'd better go. So I head home, grabbed my gear, a little bit late to the warm-up. We got to tea time and Adelaide was 6 down for 171. I think I'd bowled something like 28 overs or something. I had 3, I think it was 3 for 33 or something like that. Anyway, I said to the skipper, let's just stay out here, get this done, get it over and done with. We're finished and they got champagne coming in the room and they've got, T-shirts made. So we went back. We actually went off and we came back out and they didn't score for 20 minutes. And Dizzy was batting at the other end. Anyway, a guy left arm, Derek Woodcock takes a wicket. Then I go bang, bang, and they're 9 down for 174, right? Anyway, I bowl this big loopy wrong and then the number 11 charges at me and we bowl him and we've won by a run and I've taken 6 for 35 or something of 34 overs and I've won another one. So it was just an amazing week.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, you didn't even know which planet you were on.
No. And it's, I don't think I paid for anything go to a restaurant, I didn't pay for anything for a month. So
yeah.
It was a big month. Lots of memories.
Yeah. All thanks to Magic Mountain.
Yeah, that's it. Up and down. Yep. Sober up.
What is it? Just some massive water park with slides and everything, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Brilliant.
Yep. Yeah, I just thought, right, I'm taking off on my own. I'm going to go down on my own and just gather my thoughts because it's been a heavy couple of days, and I realised that I did have that A grade final coming up. So I thought Cedric Gully had been good enough to get me across here in Adelaide, so I better try and at least turn up half decent. And unfortunately, Maisie got me on the Saturday night. So.
Yeah, look, who needs an ice bath when you can have a magic mountain, eh?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I've only had one ice bath in my time, Graham, and that's my last one. Yeah, never again.
You probably need one more for your fingers than your legs when you're a leg spinner, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, let's just get to India. Let's get to your other tests.
Yep.
As you say, disappointed not to get on that West Indies tour. And then there was a bit of a gap between test matches for Australia then. But you were selected on that tour to India. So how was that? Obviously, you want to play once for Australia, but then I guess to get picked on a touring side is something else again.
Yeah, I was just so glad I went on that one. Really wanted to see India and experience India. And Warne was injured. I think he'd done the tendon in his hand. So Brad Hogg and I went on that one. It was only a one-test series. It was a one-off because there was a 7 one-dayers were tagged onto it, or I think a test was even tagged onto this one-day series. Yeah, I got to spend some great time with Bishan Beatty there.
Wow.
Talking to him especially about flight and how he used flight as a weapon. Yeah, it was amazing place. And we got around on trains up to Patiala. In the test match, Sachin's first game as captain. And
no problem.
I was lucky enough to get him for, I think it was 10 scored by Junior War in the first slip. And that was the other ball of the century, I reckon. We'll line them up against each other.
Absolutely, yeah. I had to watch it before speaking to you. So, yeah, it's a ripping turner, isn't it? It certainly is. Doesn't quite pitch in the same place as Warnie's ball of the century.
No.
But, yeah.
It was just interesting how he just he didn't know what to do with it. He sort of, do I cut it or do I push it? And
yeah, kind of flicked at it. Well, yeah. Rather than me talking, actually, just for the record, do you want to just take us through that delivery from start to finish? Go on.
Yeah, look, there was a fair amount of drift on it, actually. And it did, you're right, it did spin big. And that's why I call it the other ball of the century. But it was probably a little bit shorter. And it looked like he didn't know whether to go on the front or back foot and then whether to cut it. And then he ends up sort of just pushing it and he's put it straight into Junior's hand. So I was bit upset with Heels that game because he missed Ganguly in a stumping, actually clipped Ganguly's front thigh. I think that's what sort of put Heels off. But I reckon I could have got a 5-for in that game. I finished with 3-for in the first innings, I think. I'm sure if I'd got Ganguly, they'd give me 4 and I could have finished it off, I reckon, and picked up a bag in the Indian match. So
definitely
wasn't to be again.
No. And to go back to what you were saying earlier about Australian pitches during the Sheffield Shield not conducive to leg spinners, was it kind of welcome to get to India and start to bowl on some turning wickets?
Yeah, look, I think absolutely, because it's renowned for it, right? So I actually found the UK was one of the best places to bowl leg spin in some of those dry wickets in the UK. But yeah, I mean, in India, it spins, but they're also very good players to spin, aren't they? So
yeah,
you're up against that. But yeah, it's a really difficult one in Australia for spinners here now. I think Sydney's the only one that's not dropping now. So they're just perfect pitches. They just don't wear. You rely on the football in the winter to tear them up, and so the depth of the roots on the grass, they don't recover and they break up a lot easier. These dropping wickets are very difficult to bowl spin on. So yeah, makes it really tough for a guy like Swepson. Even Nathan Lyon bowling in Australia. It's really difficult when these drop-in pitches are now manufactured out the back of the oval and there's no wear on them. They just mow them and roll them out the back and they bring them out in pristine condition, having no wear and tear. So
yeah, it's not going to work, is it? Yeah. Back to that test. I mean, you as you said, you took 3 wickets. You performed really well. You got the Indian captain Tendulkar, so you must have been pretty thrilled about your performance. You couldn't have thought that was going to be your last test for Australia at that point, did you?
No, not at all. I mean, I knew Warnie was getting some injuries at the time and having injuries at the time. I suppose Dewey McGill came on the scene after that as well. I did have troubles with my shoulder. I'd had a rotator cuff mended, and then I did blow a bicep as well after that in a Shield game, got sort of a bicep that's half missing now, but I did long heads and then they screwed that back on and then sort of tore half the belly of the bicep. But my shoulder probably at that point had enough. And then Stewie McGill came on the scene and his record's pretty good. He finished up having a pretty good career with a couple hundred test wickets. So
yeah, just give us one line on Stuart McGill then, because we spoke earlier about the slight differences between you and Warne's. His wrong and maybe not so good, but mastered the flipper, whereas you kind of more relied on the wrong end for your different delivery, as it were. What would you say about McGill?
Yeah, look, a big turner as well in the conditions. All three of us could certainly turn the ball square and position the wrist to do that. He had a very, I suppose, a little bit more round arm with a wrist that was always square. So he did turn the ball a long way and he had a reasonable wrong one as well. He used flight pretty well. You've got to be able to spin the ball, Graham. It's the big factor for a leg spinner. You can't just roll these things out. There's a lot of effort put in. I remember TJ used to always say, we do as much as at the crease as a fast bowler.
Yeah.
With our shoulder and our all the right side. We may not run up to this crease, but the effort to actually bowl leg spin at the crease and bowl it well and with lots of revs on it takes a lot of inertia and a lot of energy.
Definitely. Yeah.
And that's what all three of us did, I think. We learned to put as much energy and a rev into the ball, and you've got to be able to spin it big. And that was always, don't turn up if you're not going to spin it big, You're going to spin it as hard as you can and as far as you can.
Yeah. And from a personal point of view, did you get to know Stuart McGill at all? Part of that spinners club that you want to have a chat with him and talk about bowling? And
yeah, he's a different cat. It was a bit different to the usual. All the leg spinners are a bit mad, to be honest. But I went to the academy with him. He kept himself to a little bit. So
did he? Yeah.
Didn't get to know him that well. Not as well as Warne.
No, obviously not.
Yep.
Do you just want to kind of summarise what happened after India? And obviously, you had the injuries.
Yeah.
Was there ever a time when you felt close to recall?
No, I think once Stewie McGill had started to do well, I knew there was probably going to be a shootout between he and Warne. So I was probably number 3. Yeah, sort of my last 2 years of Shield cricket, I actually took off to the Netherlands in the winter and coached Rotterdam for 2 seasons. So
yeah, how was that?
Oh, terrific. Really good. It was just different. You talk about cricketers never seeing leg spin. They'd never seen a leg spin. So,
no.
I was the Wizard of Oz coming across the Netherlands and playing on those Koya mats. There was only one turf wicket back then at the Amsterdam club. That was good fun, coaching all the kids. I mean, it's an amateur sport there, let's face it. There's only 5,000 cricketers. So
if we see a Dutch leg spinner emerging in the next few years, we know it's
maybe.
All down to you, yeah.
Maybe I've had an influence. But I do remember getting a phone call from Dave Watmore. I think it was my second year, or it could have been the first one. And I think Alan Donald had done his ankle. And he said, would you be interested in coming playing for Warwickshire? I said, oh, mate, I've been craving to play county cricket for a long, long time after going on that Young Australia trip. Anyway, he said, look, we're looking at someone else, but if it doesn't work out, we'd love to talk to you. And anyway, they ended up going with Murali. So I missed the opportunity with Warwickshire. So I would have loved to play county cricket. I just think I could have done well on those wickets. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh, that's a real shame you didn't get play. And you didn't come over and play any of the league setup either. There wasn't that opportunity like the league underneath county cricket.
No, I played at Uxbridge and I came over earlier. And I think that's in the Middlesex County.
Yeah.
Ended up staying just outside the Great Park in Windsor.
Oh, yeah.
And struck up a relationship with the head of security there at Windsor, Stan Highmore, who was the captain of the Windsor Cricket Club. So I ended up playing games with them as well.
So when was that?
That was in, I reckon, 89, 90 when I went on a Crusaders tour.
Okay.
They call it Crusaders, and we're playing sort of different teams throughout the UK, and we played against that Windsor Cricket Club in the grounds there. Anyway, Stan said, why don't you, if you're living nearby, come and play some odd matches. And yeah, I still remember Lizzie coming down at tea time one time and said, what's an Australian doing in my cricket team?
No way. When did that happen?
Yeah, that was one of the games. One of the games I was playing for.
She came down?
Yeah, sometimes she'd wander down to have a look at the cricket.
No way.
She'd come in at tea time sometimes.
But those were her very words. What's an Aussie doing in my team?
Yeah, what's an Aussie doing in my cricket team?
That's brilliant.
Remember running along the long walk and met with Maddie Elliott, and she breezes past in a Rolls or Jag or whatever she was, driving with a page boy next to her. Yeah, just flew past us while we were running. So She loved that park, right? So what a place Windsor is. And
Oh, it's stunning, yeah.
yeah, I met her twice. So the other one was at Crusaders game, and we actually took Nugget. I don't know if you've heard of Nugget Rees here, but he's like the team mascot. Barry Rees, his name is. Nugget, we call him Nuggets. He's been around the team since way back when Barry Jarman and Ian Chappell first started captaining South Australia.
What's his official role?
Oh, he's just a character, right? Just a character that nothing's bad in his world, and he's just a wonderful person to have around the team. I still remember Nugget shaking your hand, and because when Nugget shakes your hand, it's been shaken, right? He shakes the hell out of it. But I remember I was standing next to him, and we'd coached him. We said, Nug, when you shake the Majesty's hand, you've got to just do it really slowly and softly, right? And he understood, and took it on. Anyway, we get to the point. He grabs a hand really softly. He's doing really well. He's not shaking it. The only problem we didn't tell him was you've got to let go, Nug, eventually.
Yeah.
So he kept holding onto a hand, right? And I'm nudging him. I said, Nug, let go. And then he just blurts out, pleased to meet you, Majesty. How are the corgis? And then just, big smile. I think she realised, this guy was sort of, who he is.
Yeah. A bit different, should we say? Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. Lots of memories, mate.
Yeah, brilliant memories. How'd you look back, and what did it mean to you to play in the Ashes?
Oh, look, I think it's a bonus. It was the Ashes that I debuted in, that rivalry that goes back so many, many decades. And it's always the most talked about series, let's face it, on either side. Just to get the baggy green, but to do it in an Ashes test is probably that icing on the top. Yeah, no regrets. I got to the pinnacle. I didn't play as many as I would have liked, but Dennis Lilly always says to me that probably could have played 50 plus tests if that blonde fella wasn't around. So maybe that's where it sits.
Maybe that is where it sits. What is not in doubt is that we have been royally entertained by Peter McIntyre with his tales of Magic Mountain, the real ball of the century, and the late Queen Elizabeth popping in for tea at Windsor Park. And of course, that much-missed blonde fella. As Peter said, the twin leg spin attack in Adelaide couldn't prevent England from winning that fourth test by 106 runs. Chris Lewis and Devon Malcolm both taking 4 wickets as Australia were bowled out for 156, chasing 263 to win. Peter mentioned the Young Australia Tour of 1995 and that match at Edgbaston against the TCCB 11, captained by Hugh Morris and featuring the likes of Matthew Maynard, Adam Hollyoake, Robert Croft and Alan Mullally. The Young Australia side was even more star-studded. Matthew Hayden, Justin Langer, Ricky Ponting, Adam Gilchrist. For the record, Young Australia won that match by 9 wickets. The pick of the bowlers? Peter McIntyre, with 5 for 38 in the first innings and 3 for 17 in the second. It's a shame he didn't get the call from Warwickshire, as he clearly took a liking to that Edgbaston wicket. What's more, the Young Australia bowling attack in that match featured no less than 3 of our one Ashes Test wonders, Peter himself, Sean Young and Joe Angel. Joe Angel played his one Ashes Test in the game after Peter at his home ground in Perth. Find out about his moment in the Ashes sun and how he enjoyed some downtime in Pakistan with an AK-47 on the next episode. Until then, I've been Graham Barrett, and this has been Once Upon a Time in the Ashes.